let me ask for the views of Professor, he's the expert here, Professor Gideon Adibe. Let's take it one after the other. Let's say Plateau State. What comes to you as a significance of the Plateau State as a political bloc? We do know that the North Central generally is always a swing bloc for every election. It's a mixture of the Muslim, Christian, and a lot of ideological, a mixture of ideologies over the last few past years in our politics. So usually, if you're going to win, the North Central often determines who wins the election. Because if you go to the North, Northwest, Northeast, and you win all of those, or you go South, South, and Southwest or Southeast, and you win those ones, you always need the North Central to strike the balance. Oftentimes, that's what plays out in our politics. How significant? When you see the national chairman of the party, who was the candidate of the APC in the last election, welcoming his opponent into the APC, what do you think this means?
Yeah, I think it's very multi-layered. The first thing to say is that in Nigerian politics, enmity and loyalty, enmity is only for a season. Loyalty is only for a season. The fact that somebody is giving you loyalty today or is your political enemy today does not mean it continues. In other words, it's not a question of principle. I'm not too sure whether I will call it opportunistic, what is happening now in terms of defections. It seems to be there. In comparison, for example, if you look at the United States of America since 1856, there have been only 49 switches of political parties since 1856. In the UK, in the UK, since 1979, you have only 229, and one will expect that in their kind of system is where carpet crossing is more. So what does that tell you? That in our own system, it's just, as people have always said, these are special purpose vehicles. But coming specifically to Plateau, like many other parts, like the Southeast, like the Southwest, it's an area of the country that voraciously and very vocally, if you can say, searching for where to anchor its identity. Should it anchor its identity on the North? In the North, because it's not geographically located in the North. Or should it anchor its identity in the South? It is neither here nor there. I mean, when I say, I mean the core middle belt like Plateau and Benue, having this Muslim population and all this. So it continues to swing. We don't really know how this will play out. What I can say about these defections is, for now, it has created a momentum for the ruling party. Having said this, if something, because there is always one variable in your analysis that you may not have taken cognizance of, but which will come up to become a game changer. If tomorrow you have one or two governors, let's say the ADC is able to resolve some of his problems and people start to see it as a credible alternative, and you have one or two defections, it will become self-perpetuating. So the momentum, even if the ADC gains only 5 seats, the momentum will seem to shift very dramatically to its side. So right now, it is getting the momentum. Like Karl Marx said about capitalism, capitalism will generate the seeds of its own destruction. This defection will also generate the seeds of the implosion or potential implosion of the ADC. So many people are moving into the party. Not all of their aspirations and ambitions will be satisfied there. That will create a bulk of dissatisfied people or politicians, which potentially, if ADC is able to present itself as a credible alternative, which will potentially be, a recruiting ground for the ADC. But for that to happen, there has to be a credible alternative. Right now, there doesn't seem to be a credible alternative. All the existing parties have one issue or the other. So are they being opportunistic by defecting, or are they being smart? It depends on your own choice of vocabularies. You know, for example, that if you go to the PD, if you stick with the PDP and you win an election, there is a possibility that the court will say that the faction of the PDP that on which you won an election was not the legal one, the legitimate one. You lose your election. On the other hand, if you want to move, if you want to follow the ideology of the goat following the man with the palm front, and you try to play smart, you know, people will say you don't have principle, but then self-preservation is the first law of nature. So it just depends on how we look at it. And I don't think, for me, I don't want to be very... we have now come to accept, in terms of our political culture, that political parties are not driven by any kind of principle. They're just special purpose vehicles. So we have lost that idea that, you know, people will swallow, go back to their vomit. Look at Boala, look at Reno Mokria. They understand the Nigerian psychology that you condemn them for 2 months and then the life goes on.
And perhaps, I mean, maybe some of us who are students of political science and who understand that you cannot run the affairs of a state without understanding the isms and the philosophies and ideologies that run political society. I mean, in the Second Republic, you understand that whether you're a liberalist or you're a Pan-Africanist, you're a nationalist in tendency, or you outrightly say you're a socialist in your economic belief, or you're a capitalist, or you're a conservative, you're a liberalist. And a lot of people will be asking the questions, what do you believe? And in America, where you grew up will determine what your understanding or your ideology is. But sadly, it is what it is today in Nigeria, because I know for sure that, and I had this conversation with members of the PDP, leaders of the PDP, who said they founded the PDP as a right of the center. And those who founded the APC said some of the ideologies is enshrined in some kind of socialist and welfareist tendency at the left of the center. And you find out that at the end of the day, where are those ideologies? All of a sudden, those who believe in the power of the state owning resources and those who believe that the people should be involved in resources of the state, where are those? How did those merge? They never, a lot of the times, if you look at those who stand on those ideologies, they never agree. They would never agree. But all of a sudden, the agreement is so much so loud these days. And what exactly has caused all of this? Those are the big questions that people will be asking. Are those ideologies fundamental or they are ethereal?
Let me just tell you one thing. There's a story we say. People who say we do not believe in ideology are themselves being ideological. In other words,
it's an ideology.
It's an
ideology. Not believe in ideology.
So the end of ideology school is itself ideological. That's a mantra we say. So the ideology in Nigeria is grab power. Because power is the major means of production, distribution, and exchange.
Grabism.
You can call it, if you believe in it.
Grabism.
But for the system, they are not really... The difference between one party and the other in Nigeria today is the difference between 12 and 1 dozen. If you really want to go into parties that had ideology, I wouldn't use the word ideology in a very strict sense, but I would say, you know, principles. You have to go to, you know, Action Group, you have to go to UPN, to PRP. The others, you can call them petit bourgeois political parties if you are inclined into that such vocabularies. So, but does it really matter to an average Nigerian? People want to say, okay, people like Barak Nzugo in Kano in those days, he said his own party is for the illiterates, by the illiterates, and for the illiterates. And it worked for him. I mean, he had his own core supporters. Once you, Sean, become governor now, there are people who come around, including pastors who come and, you know, professor that you get a second term, and without you, you are the best thing that has happened to the country since after ice cream and still washing kapa or egusi soup. So I think this is what it is in Nigeria. But it says more about our lack of institutions. It is also says more about our lack of core beliefs. In fact, if you have core belief, and I don't mean principle in a very dogmatic sense. If you have core belief, they don't go very far in politics. In fact, I actually gave a lecture somewhere where I was arguing that it is one thing to be able to win an election. and another thing to be able to dip your hand into that furnace and get your mandate. For that reason, I was arguing, I think it was to the Nigerian Labour Congress, that what some of us were hoping is to see somebody who will understand the way the system works, use that system to gain power, and then commit what America Cabral will call class suicide. So, and we have seen people like that who get radicalized by power. You see Moritala Mohan, people who had previous shady background, they come in, they become so radicalized, and then turn themselves against the system. That has been our hope. In fact, some of the most compelling arguments of supporters of Tinubu in the midst of all those controversies was they say, oh, well, you may say he's this and he's that. So if you say he's a thief, we don't argue with you, but it takes a thief to catch a thief. So that let's give these people a chance. That the politics of messianism had failed after Buhari. Messianic politics, that this is one man who will be very redemptive, who will redeem Nigerians. And after that, people are now saying, well, so what next? We have seen it all, we have had it all.
Yeah. And a lot of the times, season and time is also very reflective of, and you saw what happened in the UK, where it does happen that the party that held sway for the longest time started losing it. They started making errors until they started having the conversation of Brexit, and the center could not hold naturally. Because the economic situation of the country did not show that the ideology or their philosophy of running their party and their government is working. And I mean, those who would they ever forget some of our friends in the north who wanted to come to the south because of the ideology and the philosophy of Obafemi Awolowo running as a premier of in that region. And you understand that this is what Obafemi Awolowo and his party wanted, different from what the MPN and the UPN, every other person said they wanted in their different region. And you wonder that what exactly, it looks like we are confused as a people. So one person comes, starts something, another person comes, kills it. He's so confused whether or not, because it comes down to the core of what does our nation need. And when the people make a decision that we are in need, there's a poverty in the land, this party says that they can eradicate poverty, bring them in. And that was sold, MK Abiola, for example. Eradication of poverty is on top of his agenda. And I see that this lack of philosophy is affecting our nation.
For me, I think what we need is somebody, I've said this severally, unless we're able to create a nation, every solution you throw to the myriad of our problems will end up becoming part of the problems. So I will want somebody, irrespective of party, and irrespective of your previous background, who can come in, commit that class suicide, which class suicide means denying your ethnic identity, your religious identity, and focusing on doing the right thing. Almost close to what Obasanjo tried to do, despite his own shortcomings. So when you get somebody like that, and Nigerians start to have a sense of being one, that is equivalent to what Toxevi will call concurrent majorities. You will start achieving an elite consensus. Then it becomes easier to govern the country. Right now, even the leaders, the way they carry themselves, many people, the good thing that is happening about this defection, the unintended positive consequence, is that people are saying, oh, does it mean that these people are going to take this election serious? Because there is a whole group of people who believe that, look, Maurice Iwu is going to be an angel. That's, that's whatever you do, the election is already a foregone conclusion. What if they announce their results before the elections are even concluded and ask you to go to court? What will you do? So I am trying to say that there are positive things. We are talking about the election, which we are assuming that votes will count. And the way both the ruling party and the opposition are taking it, they are behaving as if votes will count. So we take that as one of the positives in these defections.
Let's go on a break. But there are controversy around the visit of President Bola Tinubu to Turkey. A little slip for a few seconds has made the headlines and overshadowed what has become a major deal between Turkey and Nigeria. President Bola Tinubu making some audacious statement about what he expects as outcome of that meeting. We'll be right back and asking my guest tonight, what does it benefit or what does it hold for the average person in Nigeria? Tinubu in Turkey gets our attention next after this break, everyone. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us on the program. Our attention shifts to President Bola Tinubu's trip to Turkey. Is reported to that country to have some engagement on trade, economy, and security conversation on how Turkey can get on board in the Nigerian business. So earlier on, what has gotten the headlines, and we're getting reactions from the presidency, is how the president had a few seconds of sleep, and he was being helped by his aide to get up when himself and his counterpart were walking down the aisle there when the ceremony to welcome him officially to the country was going on. And a lot of people have been reacting to what could have led to the fall. Well, the presidency has since reacted to say the president is fine, he's okay, in good health, and it's continued to attend to some of the engagements he's been lined up to do. And afterwards, we saw the president sitting down with the President Erdogan and in an agreement that was signed earlier today. And of course, we saw that the president has gone into a dinner, and those are some of what is being done today. But let's talk about what Turkey can do for Nigeria and what Nigeria can also in exchange give to Turkey. Professor Adibe is still with us, the professor of political science. Thanks so much, Prof, for joining us. Turkey, there are those who have criticized the president. He spent so much time out of the country. He only got back into the country halfway into the month in the beginning of the year. Now he's off to Turkey. But if are you one of those who think that if it's of benefit to the country, why not if not?
Sure. Let me say that capital smells opportunities. You do not need to go to any land to woo capital. Once there are opportunities, even in war-torn areas, capital will move in. How many presidents in the world do you know traveling around the world, because they are looking for investors? What is the role of the economic mission in your embassies? So while I recognize the role of personal diplomacy plays a role, but not to the extent of being a globetrotter. I think, but he didn't start it, Obasanjo did that, Buhari did that. So more is becoming more like a tradition among our own presidents. But I don't think personally it's something I support. I think you have Minister of Foreign Affairs, you have your trade missions in your various embassies. There is no reason why a president of the country should constantly be on the move. You know, you should stay. How many times have you had a Prime Minister of the UK or even Donald Trump or leaders of other countries junketing around the world and saying they are looking for investors? Yeah, you do go in strategic cases, not the cases where your trade missions and Minister of Foreign Affairs cannot handle. And not especially in these days where you can even use your video conferencing to talk to your counterparts. I don't think it's, I think it's one of the, people see it as more going for photo ops with world leaders. But that is what it is. People conflate personal diplomacy with globetrotting by presidents.
So you see Turkey sits the Mid-Eastern politics, he plays it well, plays the Western politics very well. European politics is at the heart of that nation. In fact, as long as you cross the bridge, it does look like you're moving from Europe to the Middle East. So that country is a very interesting one.
But belonging to neither, if you remember its own challenges in trying to become member of the European Union, that tells you also the level of acceptance.
And give it to Turkey. You now have a lot of Turkish products flooding the market, competing shoulder to shoulder with the Chinese product. In the furniture business, they're doing very well. They're probably topping. Even in the fabric market, they're doing very well. Now in medicine, Turkey is another destination for medical tourism. A lot of Nigerians now go to Turkey for aesthetic medicine and all that, and even in hardware and sophistication of military weaponry, Turkey is playing very highly in that. You think that whatever deal Nigeria is signing, and I see the NSA, the Minister of Interior, the Trade Minister, all of them are there in Turkey. And the caliber of persons and the long list of people that we see going to Turkey, it does look like this is going to be taken seriously.
Yeah, if the president, for example, had just traveled to Turkey as one of the few travels, it would not have generated concerns. But it's constantly on the move. So whatever strategic importance this might be is diluted by the fact that he's a frequent traveler. So, and I think people will just see it as one of those travels. What is it that really? You know, there are times, certain circumstances that might justify that such travels. But for the fact that he's constantly on the move, he returns today, stays 1 week, 2 weeks, is off again. I'm not too sure it is very good, even in terms of optics. Even from other countries around the world, looking at you, you should, first of all, show that you love your country, that you're very comfortable being in your country, not constantly on the move. Having said that, I'm not trying to downplay the role, because whatever they are discussing about in Turkey is not in the public domain, but there are travels and attends all manner of meetings here and there, even those ones that the Minister of Foreign Affairs, or certain deals that the trade mission in the embassy, you know, can easily handle. Must you constantly be there yourself?
But if you, and those who say in terms of security and securing this country, Turkey, we need to have a conversation with a country like Turkey, especially because we're looking for hardware to fight the battle. You don't think that you need your men on the ground in the room to cross the T's and dot the I's?
Well, do you really think in this modern world that all the conversations you need to be physically present? There are often people who clear the way. I mean, who will be able to identify the critical people you will match in both countries if you really want to have any deal. I'm not specifically focusing on Turkey, but generally with the frequency of the travel, which, as I said, you know, started with Obasanjo and then Buhari, and then is, you know, taken to another level by the president. I think it's also time that people don't believe he's taking the job of the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the trade embassy missions in our different embassies.
But what do you make, I mean, what does it make the leader of a country who sits at home and doesn't engage? What does it make him look like, diplomatically speaking?
Do you think sitting at home means that you're not engaging? How many leaders of the world you know of are constantly traveling out of their countries, except when they are critical things? If, for example, the Prime Minister of UK tomorrow says he's traveling to Europe or coming to, you know it's a serious matter, but not every time. Almost on a monthly basis, you are half of the time out of the country.
So you'd rather have President Bola Tinubu sit more in Nigeria, stay more in Nigeria, do a lot of visa engagement by proxy, and get the job done?
Foreign policy flows from domestic policies. The strength of your domestic engagement is also a function of the strength of your domestic politics. So you need to be around, at least to be, you know, for that sense of optics. You need to show that you love your country, you stay around. There are people who can do this. I'm not saying that the president should not travel at all, but it should not be that every time you're on the move. It's like in the time of Buhari, who prefers to go and grant interviews to foreign journalists than to local journalists. What kind of optics, what is the subtext to all that? I think if I were some of his advisors, I mean, you don't really need photo ops with world leaders. And there is nothing leaders, you know, people like Turkey, whatever they have, they are the ones who need to sell to us, which means we are more likely the market, which means they are more likely needing us than we need them. You know, there will be facilitators, and some of the critical people will probably come to the country. I'm not saying the president should not go at all, but I think it's being overdone. It's being overdone.
Professor Jidefo Adibe is a professor of political science Thank you so much indeed. It's good to see you again, Prof.
Yeah, thank you very much,
appreciate
Sean. I told you I thought something happened, so that's why you have not heard from you.
No, thank you so much, Prof.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.